Okay. I think we're going to get started. Hold on, let me just turn that off.
Rabbi Henderson, you've only been here less than 2 years and you've already adopted the you all.
Don't worry, I come by it naturally. I grew up in South Carolina. This is
true.
This is legit for me to say y'all, but it's good to say it and not have people like turn their head and, you know, like, what? What's that? So welcome, everyone. It's a funny setup we have here, so I'm just going to describe what I'm seeing so that you have a sense. So for those of you who did our high holiday class, it's a similar kind of thing. So I'm sitting with a laptop in front of me so I can see all the people on Zoom. We have a TV screen up to my left so that all the people in the room can see the people on Zoom. And then we have this device called the owl so that if you look at my screen, you see there's this panoramic view so that people on Zoom can see the people in the room. So Heather, say something.
I'm saying something, so it'll focus on the owl.
There you go. Okay, great. So we are like so highly teched up right now, which is great. And we're going to really hope and pray that the tech supports us going forward. I really had no idea, you know, who we were going to have in person and who we were going to have on Zoom. So right now the preponderance of you are on Zoom, but we may have a few more people in person. Who knows? I'm hearing myself echo a little bit, so I'm just going to, let's see. I don't know. I really have no idea. Oh, I know what it is. There we go. I'm glad Heather's here. Heather's the tech expert. Okay, now I don't hear myself echo, which is good. Okay, so I'm going to say just a little bit about the origin of this class, and then we're going to dive in. So, and I'm really glad to see so many of you coming from like all different places. Hello, Marlene and Gary. My in-laws are here from New Jersey. Yay. So I had a number of people asking for a class that really wouldn't assume any kind of like base knowledge about Judaism, but would help to give context to like a whole variety of different subjects and topics. And so we're going to be doing this class monthly on the third Wednesday of the month. And the topics are going to change each month, really based on what you want to learn about. So I had a number of questions from people about what is going on in the Friday night service? Where did this come from? Help me unpack this structure of the service. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on tonight. We're going to barely scratch the surface, but we may go off and jump into a totally different direction next month. So if you have particular topics or questions that you would like to see really explored in this class, please, I'm all ears, send them my way, put them in the chat. That would be great. I think we will definitely do a month, whether it's this month or next month or sometime in the spring on God. So that's coming down the pike. But other than that, it's really formed by those who are here. But tonight we're focusing on Kabbalah Shabbat, or the development of the Friday night service. And really my goals for this class are, I want you to come away with a little bit of a deeper understanding of what is the history and evolution of the structure of that part of the Friday night service. Who created it? Why are there all these psalms? What's like the underlying arc of the service? And I want to help you develop some personal strategies for trying to open up or unpack this text of the Siddur that is often, at best for some people, opaque. Like the language is archaic, it's hard, it's not a language we normally speak in, but at worst, sometimes the text is just really hard to connect to. And so similar to how we did leading up to the high holidays, we're gonna peel back some layers and we're gonna find some different strategies for how to connect. But first of all, I want to ask a question to everyone here in the room and on Zoom, which is, what brings you to Shul on Friday nights? And some of you may not come on Friday nights, or maybe come periodically, but when you get in your car and drive halfway across town when it's cold and dark in the middle of December to be here or somewhere else in Shul, or tune in on Zoom on a Friday night, what's calling you to be here? What do you find most meaningful about Kabbalah Shabbat? So you can raise your hand and say out loud, or you can type in the chat and I'll read it aloud. Ronnie, yeah.
I'll go first. I grew up in a conservative synagogue in Rhode Island, and we went Friday nights. That was ritual. At Friday night dinner. Then later on to college, I didn't do anything, and then even when I moved here and joined Chabad Hakim, I would go periodically. But when this synagogue formed with Annalie and Muriel, it was such a different experience. My life husband became regulars, and it was just like, okay, it's 5:30. Stop what you're doing. Wash your face, put on makeup. Time to go. And we really liked it. It was time together, and it was community. And so I just, even after his death, I just said, this is my lifestyle. It is community for me, even if it's just me. And I also now, during the last 2 years, feel it's really important for me to come, because I get up out of the chair. I'm not sitting there from 8 to 6, but a lot during the day. So just to get up and move and have real face-to-face, not talking to people, but just feel that community.
Yes.
That's what's really important to me.
Yes. Could you all hear Ronnie?
No.
Okay, some people could, some people couldn't. I got some thumbs up and some thumbs down. So actually, Monica, after you come in, can you just close the door so that we get the sound in here? Okay, great. And I'm going to move this slightly. Okay, maybe that will help. So
Do you want to summarize for that?
yeah, I'll just say, the watchword is community, I think.
Yeah.
And I think that sense of stability and that sense of this is my lifestyle. This is what we do. And I think especially combating the isolation of being alone in your home all week potentially, or for multiple days.
I'm on the phone, or go to, sometimes I go to face meetings, but it's not like there are days I don't know all. I don't feel that way because I do activity, but yeah.
Totally.
And what just seems so dreadful, the experience is so dreadful. It isn't.
Yeah.
I haven't for yeah.
No, right. You're not saying it's like, oh my God, it's horrible until I get to Friday night services, but there's just something, there's like a counterweight.
It's a change. It's a set in time. That too.
Can you say more about the set being set in time?
The fact that I sort of have let's say, an emotional commitment to not like physical commitment, but a commitment to save myself. I just like going to services, and I don't, and it doesn't have to be all my friends have to be there. It's just where I am at that time, at that time of the week.
Yeah, one of the things, and I think people may come out on different sides of this question. I think there is, I see it, and I see both in myself, and I see both in this community. There are some people for whom this is just what I do on Friday nights. Like it is an exception if I don't come to Shul, but like you will see me here on a Friday night. It's just like what Friday nights look like. For other people, Shabbat is really a special occasion, and they may go out to dinner, or they may go to a party or go to a jazz concert or something on a Friday night. But like when you go to Shul, it's like a special event. And I feel that push and pull often of like regular, but comforting and like elevated special experience. Okay, I'm going to read some of the responses on Zoom. So people said, community, checking in on all. Kathy meaning like checking in on everybody else in the community. I think you meant. It ends the chaotic week for us, and it eases the transition from the week. Yes, we're going to talk about that a lot. We like the music on Friday night. We are there to celebrate with others. It's less intimidating than Saturday morning. Yeah, I think a lot of people find that to be the case. We like the music. Yeah, I saw Margie. Margie, can you unmute and let's see. You're muted, but I'm just, do you have a button on your screen that says unmute?
Mute. Okay, how's that?
Yeah,
All
great.
right. Years ago, we took a course in liturgical Hebrew from one of our congregants, Myrna Rubel. And so she taught us to become familiar with melodies. What we didn't learn was why. Why the service? Why the structure? And since I don't come from a very religious background, I felt this was a great way to cement connections and hopefully improve understandings, not the least of which is, of course, the connection to community. When we started out after our liturgical Hebrew class, we would make it a business to come. This was obviously pre-COVID, to come to the synagogue Friday night, and then a group of us got together for Friday night Shabbat dinner following the service. But now it's the learning phase, the why.
Yeah, and I find, it was really interesting when I was preparing for this class tonight. I mean, I've been doing this pretty much every single Friday night for the last decade of my life, plus 15 years more like, and I learned so much that I did not know. And I think it's interesting that you can actually have a very fulfilling prayer life, many people do, and they have no idea like what the structure of the Friday night service is. There's something, it's like, it's not an intellectual experience, it's a soul, it's a body experience. So who cares? Like the rabbi's just going to say what page to turn to, and we're going to sing the song, and like, great. But my hunch was, and we can't do this kind of education during the service. It's a different experience to pray together than it is to learn about the service. But I hope that by understanding it a little better, we're going to get a little more out of it. Anyone, maybe one last voice, anyone want to share anything that brings them here that hasn't already been mentioned? Just raise your hand if you want to share. Okay. All right. So I'm going to share my screen back to the slides. And
Herbert, when it comes to.
here we go. Okay, great. So we're going to start with a quote. This is like big picture. Zoom out. Small on here. Okay, and let me. Can you just you know how to like make that minimize that little window there? Okay. Yeah, perfect. Okay, great. Can I have a volunteer, either somebody on Zoom or here in the room, who can read this quote? This is 2 slides. It might be better if it's somebody on Zoom. We've got a screen, but it's kind of a lot. So somebody on Zoom, can I have a volunteer to read? Just David Epstein, you are on. So this is a quote from a sort of an intro to Judaism guide that I have come back to again and again and again over the last number of years. And this is basically why Shabbat, even broader than the Shabbat service. Why Shabbat? So this is written by Rabbi Sharon Brous and Aaron Alexander. So David, take it.
How do we live in a world that seems to make a mockery of our deepest held beliefs and our tradition's most profound claims? The first and most foundational claim that Judaism makes about human beings is that we are created B'Tselem Elohim, in God's image. Our tradition teaches that this means that every person, by virtue of being born, has innate dignity and worth. And yet, the reality of our world seems to deny the truth of these claims. Judaism is rooted in an understanding of God and humanity that fundamentally rejects the degradation, exploitation, and diminution of human spirit that is characteristic of human society. Millions die of hunger and treatable diseases every year. War, hatred, prejudice, terror, all of these are about denying the sanctity and worth of the human life. This leaves Jews with a great dilemma. Do we disengage from a reality that seems to make a joke of our core principles? Or do we abandon core principles that seem naive, impossible, and fantastic? So Torah offers us an eternal prescription, a holy formula that will make it possible for us to engage, live, and work in the world as it is, but also to remember to dream about the world as it could be. 6 days a week, you will engage and do all of your work, but the seventh day will be a Sabbath, a day for God. Built into the Jewish consciousness is a way to live with what is and simultaneously reject its limitations. Yitz Greenberg writes, paradoxically, Judaism affirms both the dream and the reality, both the perfect, redeemed world to be brought into being by human effort, and the imperfect, unredeemed world of today. Greenberg's stunning interpretation of Shabbat places the Jewish people as a timeless voice of dissent against the status quo, ever seeking to allow people to experience and enjoy the world as it is, while still voicing critique, though a weekly rhythmic vision of perfection, through a weekly rhythmic vision of perfection, Shabbat. He ends his vision by declaring, through total immersion in the Shabbat experience, Jews live the dream of an alternative, more perfect reality now. By an act of sheer will, the community creates sacred time and space.
Great, thank you. I love this quote so much because I just think it embraces this paradox that I think this is the secret. I will venture to say, and this is Ahad Ha'am, famously said, like, more than Jews have kept the Sabbath have kept the Jews. But I think this is why. It's because you work for the kind of world you want to see for 6 days, and on the seventh day you live as if everything is beautiful and perfect, just as it is. And we're trying to like carve out this little island of perfection in a really, really broken world. And I think the most challenging thing to do, and I see this every Friday night, even though most of us, I think, are not thinking consciously every single Friday about like how broken, I mean, some of us, I think, come in on Friday nights and are like, it's been a week in the world, it's been a week in our families, things are messed up, and it is really hard to get into the Shabbat headspace. And other times it just feels like things are kind of a little off and you don't quite know why. And so Kabbalah Shabbat is this bridge. I see it as this bridge that is trying to take us from the world as it is to the world as it could be. And as we go deep into the liturgy and look at it, we're going to sort of see it as if through a prism, through multiple angles. But I think every aspect of Kabbalah Shabbat is trying to bridge us, from brokenness to wholeness, from alienation to connection and presence, and from a world where like we're trying to make things work, to a world where we can just say, like, for 25 hours, I'm just gonna stop for a little while. I'm just gonna let it be and let it rest. Anybody wanna respond to that or complicate that or react? Raise your hand if you want to.
I got a good Shabbos song out of your comments.
Like, say what it is. What is it, David?
Let it be.
Oh yeah, excellent. I am gonna, David and I have been talking for the last couple months about like what a Beatles Shabbat, a Beatles Friday night service would look like. And I feel like, David, if after this class, this is your homework, I'm just assigning this to you, but anybody could do this, like pair Beatles songs with the themes of each of the Psalms of Kabbalah Shabbat, that would be like incredible. Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm not enough of a Beatles, person, but.
That's what that program did that I participated in. It was very cool. It paired the songs with the liturgy.
So that's the big picture. Now we're going to go more granular. Okay. So if you have a Siddur and you're at home, feel free to grab it. You don't need it, but it might help. If you are here in the room, you get a special treat. And if you want to pick one of these up and you're not here in the room, feel free to just pass one of these to everybody. So I discovered this little, I'm gonna stop the share again so you can see what I'm holding up. We have these little paperback Kabbalah Shabbat Sidurim in our storage room. There's probably like 200 of them at least there. You tell, what's the story?
Yeah, but basically, these were to try out.
Yes.
The late Shalom,
What?
and so we got some, I thought they were having, were supposed to go back.
Well, we still have them. I don't think anyone wants them back now.
But
So
yeah, these were before the late Shalom.
yeah, so when the conservative movement decided to update their Siddur, they wanted to like float a little trial balloon around in a lot of synagogues. And so I got a copy. I've had this for a couple of years. What is great about this, I'm gonna give you permission to write in it, to mark it up, to take notes, to cut and paste, to do whatever you want. It was, I know, it feels like, it's like, oh my God, sacrilege. And if you want to, if you're not here with us, but you want to, come by and grab one of these, it's great because I'm going to make a lot of suggestions that it might be helpful to have a Siddur sometimes on Friday night that you have doctored and really made your own. They did make some significant changes, not significant, they made some structural changes between like this Siddur and the one we use, the sort of final hardback red version. I'll talk about those in a little bit, but for the most part, you can use this on a Friday night and it's great. It has everything you need in it and some. So let me share my screen again and I'm going to talk you through the structure. And holler or unmute or pause if you need clarification. Okay. According to the Talmud, the core of we have 3 daily prayers: Shacharit in the morning, Mincha in the afternoon, Ma'ariv in the evening service in the evening, and that's set out already 2,000 years ago. That's that gray box here on the right. And let me get my little laser pointer. Oh yeah. Okay. So we have the evening service, which consists of Baruch Hu and the blessings before and after the Shema and the Amidah and Aleinu. We're not really going to be talking about that tonight. We're going to be talking about all the things that lead up to that. So the earliest additions to the Friday night service were formally, the one that really stuck is these 2 Psalms, Psalms 92 and 93. You know what I'm going to do is I'm going to share this in a different way so that I can show you the text of them. Okay, so if you're in my little orange book here, you'll see that toward the end of Kabbalah Shabbat on page, what is it, 30, on page 30. If you're looking on the screen, these are the very, very end. Right now, it's right after Lachad Odi, but it's a psalm for Shabbat, Mizmor Shir Leyom HaShabbat. So it's pretty obvious why that would be included in the Friday night. A psalm for Shabbat makes sense. That's Psalm 92. And then right after that is Psalm 93. They're like a little unit, and we're going to talk more about the themes of those. But those are the earliest additions to kind of get you in the mood for Shabbat. So you can imagine a pretty short service on Friday nights. And then in some communities, there was a tradition, an early tradition, to begin Shabbat by singing excerpts from Shir HaShirim, or the Song of Songs. What do you know, if anything, about the Song of Songs? What is it? What's the vibe of it?
Baby wrote it.
Okay, I heard it. It's a love story. It's a love poetry.
King David wrote it.
King David, or King Solomon?
Solomon.
It might be Solomon. Yeah. David was the Psalms. Yes. So it's very steamy love poetry in the Bible. Some of the rabbis are like, how did this make it in here? But as we're going to see, it makes sense that with the metaphors and the imagery that were being developed for Shabbat as a bride, and that God or Israel is the groom, or it's the king and the queen, we're trying to kind of personify this whole thing by taking on this atmosphere of love and attraction and connection. So it makes sense that we would sing from Song of Songs. And one of the really cool things that this Siddur did was it tried to bring back the traditions of singing Song of Songs. And so in this little trial Siddur, they did something that was like a little, very ancient, but also very radical, where they would alternate, here's a psalm and here's something from Song of Songs. And they wanted to like encourage communities to reincorporate Song of Songs back in their Friday nights. I think a lot of people just got very confused by it, but when it was like, wait, I'm not just going to the very next thing in the book, it's like hopping all over the place. So in the permanent version, they stuck a few things from the Song of Songs at the very beginning. So it was optional for communities to say those, but they weren't like woven into the structure of the service. Okay, Marie said, I've heard Song of Songs as a Solomon addressed to Sheba. Is that a myth or varied interpretation? I haven't heard that specifically, but I'm not a Song of Songs expert. So I'm sure that's one of the many interpretations of where that comes from. Okay, so this was the earliest little strata here. And then, and some of you may know this because this is like very often told when we talk about the origins of Kabbalah Shabbat. We have these 16th century Jewish mystics, the early Kabbalists, they were called, who were living in the city of Tzfat in Israel in the 16th century. And these mystics essentially believed that what was going on when Shabbat came, well, let me back up. The sort of core of the mystical vision of the world is our world is on the surface broken and fractured. The entire world is God. Every little bit, every little piece and nook and cranny of this world is some aspect of God, and yet everything is disunified. I mean, and even if we're not mystics, we can sort of look at the world and say that, yeah, most of the time I perceive the world as separation. Everything looks separate and disunified and broken. And they believe that by doing mitzvot, by every little act we can do in Judaism, brought a kind of unity back to the world. And so for them, this was very, this had a very sexual connotation. There was a lot about like the unity of the masculine and the feminine, and they were all, it was sort of metaphors for the one aspect of God, the masculine aspect of God and the feminine aspect of God. And so there was this very, very sexy thing happening on Friday night where essentially and we'll see this, the whole first set of Psalms is all about God as the king. And then we get to Lachadodi, and it's about the bride and the queen. And that's the moment of unity and the moment of the wedding, the moment of the coronation. There's this like big build up to the wedding day. And then of course, as you know, like if anyone's gone to Friday night services, we turn to the back, just like you turn to the back of the wedding hall, you see the bride come in, and that's like the moment that Shabbat has arrived. So this gorgeous poem, Lachadodi, was composed by the mystics in 16th century Tzfat. We could do a whole series just on Lachadodi because it's a brilliant piece of poetry. What's that?
Shlomo Alevi.
Yeah, Shlomo Alkabetz Alevi, and his name is the acrostic in the poem. And then others added Psalm 29 to this. And then other Kabbalists brought this made this even more vast. And so, in the system we have now on Kabbalah Shabbat, we have a series of 6 Psalms that are representative of every day of the week. And it's funny, when I first heard this, I thought this was like some modern, liberal rabbis, like nice little drosh on a Friday night, like, oh, there's 6 Psalms, like use your time to think about each day that you've had in the week. And I say this pretty frequently, like, all right, Psalm 95 is Sunday. I thought that was totally a modern interpretation. No, I mean, 16th century is not that long ago, but that was exactly the purpose. It was to associate each of the Psalms on Friday night with a particular day of the week. And actually, mentally sort of do this like a tikkun, a repair, and think about, okay, Sunday, what went wrong on Sunday, or what are like the little fragments and disunified parts from Sunday that I want to fix in this moment, or let go of, or not take with me into this Shabbat. And then once you had gone through each of the days of the week, through each of these Psalms, then you would reach Lechadodi and be actually ready and open and prepared to take on Shabbat.
But they're not the actual Psalms that we say from Monday, Tuesday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday.
Correct. And we're going to talk about why these Psalms, because, okay, so Robin's pointing out a good thing, which is if you are a regular prayer in the mornings on weekdays, you'll know that like the days of the week do have set Psalms. Sunday has its own Psalm, Monday has its own Psalm, and those are already suggested in the Talmud. So those are pretty old. So you would have thought like an obvious thing would have been to choose those Psalms. That wasn't the route that the mystics went in. They chose this series, which they're all sequential. It's 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, and then 29, because that had already been added in there. And then we go to Lechadodi, and then we go all the way back to Psalm 92 and 93. And these Psalms in the mind of like the biblical scholars they're called the Enthronement Songs. They have a special name because as we will see, if you have a Siddur in front of you, or if you want to look around, they all, actually, you know what, I'm going to skip ahead because I made a slide for this.
Well, and it's interesting because the Psalm for Friday, that really is the Psalm for Friday, is Psalm 93 that we say right before.
That's right. So some of them are the corresponding ones, but I just pulled a few little quotes here, but the more you start looking, you'll see this all over the place. So a lot of these Psalms say things like, for Adonai is a great God, a king greater than all the gods. Adonai is king, let the earth exult, many islands rejoice. Adonai is king, let the peoples tremble. He sits on a throne of cherubim. Adonai reigns during the flood, and Adonai will reign supreme forever. So it's not just Rosh Hashanah when we go deep into this king imagery. It's all over the place in the Friday night service. And I think a lot of us, myself included, have this sort of knee-jerk kind of, I have this knee-jerk sort of negative reaction to the king language. I find it really negative and just hard to connect to. But Rabbi Elliot Dorff, I think this quote here I really appreciate. He said, Moshe Cordovero, who is one of these early Kabbalists in the city of Tzfat, chose these Psalms because on Shabbat we acknowledge God's ownership of the world by desisting from weekday work that uses the world for our own ends. So what's happening, I think, what could be happening as we go through each of these Psalms is we're basically saying this thing that I think the Christians, many Christians I know say all the time, but we Jews don't say so much, which is like, I'm just going to give it up to God. I'm going to just like, okay, somebody else is in charge for 25 hours. Like, I'm not in charge anymore. I'm putting it on your to-do list, God. I'm just going to like, let go, or yeah, another phrase is like, let go and let God, like, and I appreciate that sort of sense of like, all right, it's not my problem anymore. I'm just going to pause here because I've been talking a lot.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, definitely.
For the numbering of the Psalms, how did that originate? Was it because they just took them in the order that they wrote them, or did they have like a bunch of Psalms to consider and they chose these and somehow they got numbered? How does that work?
That's a great question. Ronnie asked, like, how did these Psalms get numbered? I am not a scholar of the Psalms, so I don't know exactly like who compiled them into a canon, but we do have Psalms that there's like subsets of the Psalms. So there's different categories, like there's a bunch of Psalms that say, to Mizmor LaKorach or the Mizmor LaAsaf, like there's subsections that have different titles. So they're kind of grouped in that way. So I think some of the distinctions are distinctions that like later biblical scholars made. They're like, okay, great. We're just going to call these the Enthronement Psalms because they all talk about enthroning God as king.
So they weren't necessarily written all around the same years. They could have been written.
I mean, you know, generally in the same period of time, but we don't know, we don't have like individual authorship of them. They sort of like traditionally have been attributed to King David, but that's more of a myth, I think, than like a factual piece. Other
I'm consulting your favorite thing.
Google,
No, Wikipedia.
Wikipedia.
It's a giant
Okay, great.
joke.
Robin's always the one who's like, great.
No, it's just Ronnie's.
Ronnie, when we would have on Tuesday morning, we would have little trashes after the service, and I would have several quotes when I didn't know something, I would look it up in Wikipedia just to explain it or something, so.
Nice,
And,
nice, nice. Okay, so for those of you on Zoom, how are we doing? Are you with me? Give a thumbs up. Great. So far, so good. Are there questions that you're hoping that I'm going to answer that that are bubbling in your mind that you want to sort of bring to the surface right now? Okay, so I'm going to finish going through my little evolution of the structure, and then we're gonna see where we're at. Let me go back for a second. Let me see if I want to say anything else here. Okay, great. So Kabbalah Shabbat as its own service is starting in the really like late 16th, early 17th century. There's a guy who's like sort of has an encyclopedic knowledge of what's going on in Jewish communities at the time. And even in like 1591, no one was talking about Kabbalah Shabbat. It was like not a thing yet. But by the early 17th century, there is someone named, it's a German Hasid, pietist. His name is Joseph Yuspa Hahn. I had never heard of him before this. He says, Kabbalah Shabbat has arrived. It is sweeping the nation. Everyone loves it. They're doing it everywhere. And it really like took off like wildfire. So I don't know what it was. I don't know if everyone across, you know, medieval Europe and the Mediterranean and the Middle East, I don't know like what percentage of people in that time sort of called themselves mystics or Kabbalists, but clearly this had broad appeal, so much so that it basically became like a fixed set part, not just in the region, but in Jewish communities around the world. Like you can't go to any shul where Kabbalah Shabbat is not a thing on Friday nights anymore.
What do you specify in the Ashkenazi communities?
That's where they originated. That was like sort of the nucleus here, but then, yeah. And there were still like little variations. So for example, when this, like in Sfat, when this was just starting, there's a famous Kabbalistic rabbi, Isaac Luria, and he only did Psalm 29. And the Moshe Cordovero and Shlomo Alkabetz, who wrote Lachad Odi, they did this whole thing. And you may have heard this, like, if you've heard about Kabbalah Shabbat before, you may have heard like, oh, the mystics inside, they would go out into the fields and they would wear all white and they would welcome the Shabbat bride by singing Lachad Odi. So that story is sort of an amalgamation of like multiple things. Like Isaac Luria, his custom was to go out into the fields, but he didn't sing Lachad Odi. The other guys would sing Lachad Odi, but they didn't go out into the fields. So we kind of like made this myth about what the mystics were doing. But then by the time we get to the 18th century, this is standard liturgy. And then later on, we have some other additions to this poem, Yedid Nefesh, gets added in, becomes very popular, but you're not going to see Yedid Nefesh in every Siddur. Sometimes it's left out. And Ana B'Koach is a very Kabbalistic poem, or almost like a meditation. It's considered to be like almost a name of God, and very like meditative, trying to take you into this transcendent state. And this Ana B'Koach, we sing it on Friday nights. Ana B'Koach. Many Reform and even conservative conservative communities in the 19th and 20th centuries were like so against this. You will not find Anna Bakoach in most Reform and Conservative Sidurim until I think like Sim Shalom came out. It was the first time that Anna Bakoach got included. And even sometimes it's sort of included as like, some communities do this. It's not so widespread.
Why?
I think they were very anti-mystical. I think that's my on one foot interpretation, that because of assimilation and because of trying to build a Judaism that was really like reputable in, you know, standard like American culture, they really cast off all of that old country mystical stuff. They were afraid it was going to make them look bad. And there has been a big resurgence in the last, 3 decades of Jewish spirituality, mysticism, and it's not seen as like truth anymore.
It wasn't just the mysticism, it was all the rituals,
Say more.
lighting candles,
Mm.
any distinction?
Right. It's like
Anything that was ritual that didn't fit their definition of ethical was discarded.
yeah, right. And so there's been this turn.
In
I
the
think.
process, they discarded the whole concept of accepting Shabbat as being thankful for being given it.
Mhm. Yeah, it's been interesting to see like the Reform and Conservative movements almost like merge closer to each other in the last few years and reclaim a lot of the ritual that had been really cast aside, I think, for a number of generations. We got 2 really good questions in the chat that I'm just going to read. So one person asked, why do we have both a Friday night service and a Saturday service, which is a good question. I think because I think many of us would say, a few of us are both Friday and Saturday people, but most people, it's like, I'm a Friday night person or I'm a Saturday morning person. And they're very different services. It's not always true. In some communities, aesthetically, Friday night and Saturday morning look similar, but Friday night is just shorter. But in our community, Friday night is this very musical, sometimes meditative experience with instruments, and Saturday morning is a more, I'm very wary of this word traditional, because that word I feel like is like blacklisted. Like, what does traditional even mean? It's so relative. So I don't even want to use that word, but
More structured.
structured, yeah.
Studious.
Yeah, it's a fuller liturgy. I will say that it's a longer service, pretty much anywhere you go. Saturday morning is going to be longer. We have a Torah reading on Saturday morning, which we don't do on Friday night.
And it is studious, because at least in this community, we try and study. I mean.
Yeah, right. There's study
unless
happening.
there's a B'nai Mitzvah, we really, and a lot of people have said they've missed some of that, and we used to do a
Me too. Oh
lot
my gosh,
more.
I've been craving
We've been
it.
a lot more going back and forth, and
Yeah.
we really haven't had a
Oh,
lot
don't
of
you
that.
worry. This Saturday, it's coming back. I've already put my source sheet together. The conversation's happening. But yes, the simple answer to the question is that early on in the rabbinic set format of prayer, the rabbis established 3 daily services. And the sort of origin stories for that are, one is that they were corresponding to the 3 daily sacrifices that were made in the ancient temple. There's a morning one, afternoon, and evening. And the more kind of narrative version of that origin story is that those 3 services were established by the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so they find little hooks or clues in the stories of the Avot, the patriarchs, that Abraham established the morning service, Isaac established the afternoon service, and Jacob established the evening service. So we inherited a system where this is happening multiple times a day. Sandra, did that answer your question, or did you want to? Good. Okay, thumbs up. But we got another question, which is exactly the direction we're going to go in now. So Howard, you set me up well for the next part. Howard said, essentially, all of this was made up by man. If so, which is true, and I'm going to show you a poem to that effect in just a minute. If so, why do we continue these ancient prayers and poems Why don't we write our own that are more meaningful in modern times, at least to me anyway? Great question. So I think that is where we're going to go now. And talked about the king. Oh yes, we talked about the queen. So already in the Talmud, they talk about Shabbat as a queen. Beautiful. Okay, great. So this is my poem. This is really not my poem. This is Yehuda Amichai's poem. I feel like Yehuda Amichai has words for anything. So I want to get a volunteer to read. You can see them. This very short but very profound poem by Yehuda Amichai. Can I have a? Or David, since you're unmuted, David, can you take it for us?
I can do it. Which came first? I declare with perfect faith that prayer preceded God. Prayer created God. God created human beings. Human beings create prayers that create the God that creates human beings.
I see some nods. So Yehuda Amichai, who, many people call a secular Jew, but I just refuse to see him as secular, writes that we're in this cycle, we're in this sort of chicken and egg kind of cycle of, what is the origin point of any of this? And I think each of us might have our own, theological understandings, but certainly I would say, across, even though we may feel like really inspired people wrote these words in this book, nobody, I should be very wary of saying nobody. No one that I know of is going to say that this Siddur was, and the text of it was handed down to Moses by God on Mount Sinai, the same way the Torah is. It has changed and adapted. There are earlier strata that are really ancient. There are later strata that were written, 300-400 years ago, as we've just seen. But it's changing and it's molding all the time. And so I think there's a distinction. I just heard my good friend Eliana Light, who is a wonderful Jewish musician and educator, say this, that we should make a distinction between prayers and prayer. That this is a book full of prayers that very inspired people wrote, but it's not the same as the act of prayer. That requires us, that requires some kind of engagement. So that's what we're going to do now. So what I want to do is, if you have a book in front of you, if you have a Siddur at home, open up to Psalm 95, aka L'chun Ranana. So in this book, it's on page 9. In your other Siddur, it's on 10 or 11, but I'm going to put the words up so you don't even have to get any books. You're good. Kathy asked a good question. Why do we always sing every verse of L'chado Di but omit verses in others? Great question. I'm going to hold that one for now, but I'm going to try to come back to it before the end. And if I forget, remind me. Okay. So we're going to essentially dive deep into this particular psalm and look at it from a few different angles. And you can do what we're about to do with any of the psalms in Kabbalah Shabbat. You can do this with any text of prayer, but we're just going to try it out with this one. So what we're going to do first is just read the text aloud, try to figure out the pshat, which means try to figure out, what is this text saying? Why is this the psalm that the Kabbalists chose to start out the service with? If we ignore Yedid Nefesh, which was kind of a later addition. And then we're going to look at the problems with it, because there's some problems with the psalm. This is not the easiest psalm to understand. So David Epstein, you're doing a great job reading. Can you continue for us? You're going to read just at verse 1 here. Let us go.
Let us go and sing to Adonai. Let us trumpet praise to our protector.
Keep going. We're just going to read the whole thing. It's not that long. It's only 11 verses.
Okay. Filled with thanks, let us greet God, raising our voices in chorus. Great is Adonai, a greater sovereign than all other deities. God's hands formed the earth's deep mountain crests too, are God's work. The sea is God's, for God made it. Dry land was fashioned by God's hands. Come then, let us bow and kneel, let us bend our knees in the presence of Adonai who formed us. For Adonai is our God, and we are God's flock, sheep in God's caring hands. If only you would listen today to God's voice and not become hard-hearted like the people at Meribah, like that time at Massah in the desert when your ancestors tried me, tested me, though they had seen what I had wrought. For 40 years, I was troubled by that generation, and I said, these are people whose hearts have gone astray. They do not know my ways. And in anger, I swore that they would not enter my rest.
Okay, so that took a turn.
So we had to start Shabbat.
Yeah, Robin said, not tongue in cheek at all. Very tongue in cheek. What a lovely way to start Shabbat. So this is a weird psalm. There's a lot going on here. Let's start with like, why in the world is this the first psalm we're starting with? Any ideas?
Well, at first, I will admit, I had never read the second half of this psalm, so I didn't know. So my first thought was, oh, this is like the perfect start to a service. Like, let us go and sing. There's trumpets filled with thanks. We're raising our voices. Like, this is like, here we are all together to get started and praise God and thank God. And yeah, when you turn the page though,
Just like, what is this?
I've never read that part.
Yeah. And when you read the Hebrew, you hear the Hebrew sung. Lehu Neranana has such a nice parallel to Lecha Dodi. It's the same Hebrew word. Let us go, and then Lecha Dodi, come in, bride. Let's go, bride. So there's a nice like book ending thing going on there, and it's literally a call to everybody. Great, come on, everybody, come in the show. We're gonna sing now. We're gonna go together. Join us.
I do have a question.
Yeah, Monica.
On the first part, on the second paragraph, the second line, that says, a greater sovereign than all other deities.
Mhm.
There's only one God, there's only one deity, like, so it is a little bit contradictory.
Yeah, it's funny when we see parts of the Hebrew Bible that acknowledge that there are other gods, and actually when we look at it, there's a lot of them, and we don't. It's like, ooh, what? Yeah. So in a lot of the theological systems, it's not that early. It was that God is the most powerful of all the other gods. More, it's called monolatry rather than monotheism. And we see that here. Here it is, like our God is better than your God, which it sounds like a schoolyard to me. It's like, my God can be your God in tug of war. Yeah.
But it is, my God is the only God,
Mm-hmm.
not better than yours. It's the only one.
Yeah.
Not acknowledging that there are others.
Right. So that was a later development, that idea that like, oh, our God sort of ate all the other gods. And but here we see, nope, that was not the theology of the time. There were other gods that were going on.
And it was not the theology that our God ate all the other gods.
No, that was not.
What I'm getting at was not the concept of there is only one God.
Yes.
Not that my God was better and I am now the one God, but there was always only one God.
But when was this song written? In the
King David, not really. I mean, if you go by.
So it was written when there were lots of other gods hanging around. Everybody around them was worshiping someone different or multiple different.
Mhm.
So.
Yeah, it makes sense that in that context and
But
that
it's
time.
interesting that the Kabbalists, the mystics would include that, because by the 16th century, are they still acknowledging that there are other gods?
Yeah, so that's like the funny way that liturgy is composed, is sometimes they compose new texts like Lachado D has quotes from the Psalms all over it. It's not always citing its sources, but these little phrases are picking up on ancient texts and then transforming them. Here, we're just taking an entire psalm and plopping it down in the Siddur, whether we like the words in it. Like, they're not cutting and pasting here, they're just taking the whole thing. So they have to do, yes?
Yeah, I would point out that it would seem to me it was written at a time when Jews were differentiating themselves and their religion from the surrounding deities, the surrounding peoples, and that this inclusion is reminding us of that history. Not so much saying one God because it evolved, but we emerged from these other peoples. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, and I often feel like when we're studying prayer, or really any sacred text, but especially the Siddur, which is composed over so many centuries, it's kind of an act of archaeology. Like, we're looking at these very early substrata of texts that have vestiges that are not current for us. And so we're trying to make them current, and we have to figure out how we're going to do that. And we're going to try some things in a minute that are going to give you a few options. But we're freighted with a text that is a little messy. And I'll just share, those in the room have this, but those at home don't. The nice thing about our Siddur is that it has commentary. And so there is commentary on this line. And it says, literally this line, Melech Gadol al Kol Elohim, means the sovereign greater than all divine beings, or Elohim. So Elohim here is not referring to our gods, referring to all the divine beings. And it says, the biblical reference may be either to forces in nature worshipped as gods, or to gods worshipped by other peoples. So maybe this was like, oh, the sun god, or the wind god, or the, etc. Yeah, Julian.
These words could have been written by a contemporary of Jeremiah. That was his whole point.
It's like,
You're not observing the Sabbath.
Yeah.
You're not living according to God's ways. And it says, God giving the words to God, for 40 years, I took care of you. And I've been taking care of you ever since, and you're rejecting me.
yeah. So, okay, so let's turn to this difficult part at the end of the psalm. If only you would listen today to God's voice and not become hard-hearted like the people at Meribah, like the time at Massah in the desert when your ancestors tried me and tested me. Okay, so in the original context of the psalm, it very much, like Julian said, sounds like the prophets. It's, castigating Israel for going astray. Their hearts are going astray. They're testing me. They're trying me. They're being stubborn. Fine, that makes sense in the original context of the psalm. As prayer, I don't know. Anyone out there have like a way to make this feel prayerful?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
in writing it, it's a prayer to remember.
Mm.
It's a prayer to the audience. Wake up. It's a wake-up call. And it's the writer is praying that the people will repent and go back to worshiping a God, because he's making the point, it didn't work in the past. It's part of your, and I say this is assuming a later writer.
Mm-hmm.
It clearly is written after going into the land. If you want to take it back to Solomon and the kingdom periods, you have the same problem. After Solomon, everything starts going to hell, or at least to the northern kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
So if it was written in that period of time, the message would still be applicable.
Yeah. No, and I think for those people, I'm thinking about our, like a contemporary reader, any of us, who maybe is showing up on a Friday night, after a really long day and just feeling incredibly frustrated and dejected. It could be helpful maybe to see a voice that's like expressing some of that angst, But I'll just say for myself personally, and maybe you're in this camp with me, that this language of harshness and judgment is kind of pretty much the opposite of what I'm looking for on a Friday night to enter into a connected sort of experience.
But what I
Yeah.
read
Yeah.
from it, like
Yeah.
the modern version of that paragraph to me would be that does not learn from history is condemned to repeat it. That would be my modern
Yeah.
interpretation.
So
Yes.
don't keep making the same mistakes over and over.
And look, this happened, this happened, this happened. Like the definition of insanity.
Yeah, keep doing the same
Like
thing over and over and over. Right. Right.
In a 17th century language.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Julian?
Again, to be the contrarian, statement, Adonai is our God. Now, the person saying this is saying, we are not like that generation because we are here celebrating the Shabbat. We are recognizing God's kingship. And we pray that we are not like the generation that was lost in the desert.
Well, I think that's what Monica's saying. Remember, remember. It says Zachor.
Right, right, right. I mean, I'll tell you, here's how I am understanding it, at least today, which is, it does change every day, that is for sure. So we start out, like we said, in this like, come on, everybody, let's go. Let's have this, as really actually where we started with what Ronnie said, let's be in community together. This is written in the plural, let us go, let's be together. And then almost in the same breath as after we're in this like praise mode and we're on this, let's do it, we're finally here, let's show up, let's be together, we come to the obstacles. We see like what happens when we try to show up and be together. Our hearts get hard. We get stuck. We get fixed. Like something in us doesn't want to connect or open. We have hearts that go astray. We're distracted. We're wandering in our minds. Like it's actually really hard. As much as we say we want connection, we also have to contend with what the obstacles are. And so I feel like this psalm is sort of expressing that dual nature of human nature, which like wants it, but also doesn't want it at the same time. At least that's how I'm seeing it today. But what I want to do is I want to just see how the act of a different translation of the English might open up something new for us. And so I want to show you
yeah, because I did not like I was reading it in Hebrew and the translation
yes.
was not.
Yes, yes. So this is I don't know, I would say like pretty close to a literal translation, but for those of you who can read Hebrew, the Hebrew contains just so much more texture and nuance that is not going to come across in a very literal kind of translation. So there is a community in New York City called Romemu. It was sort of a sister congregation of Mishkan, where I was in Chicago. And they wrote their own Siddur a couple of years ago, even after I left New York. So I didn't get to ever pray with it, but I live 4 blocks from this shul. So I went, on occasion. And the translator of the Siddur is a rabbi by the name of Jill Hammer, who has been very active in building what's called the Kohenet, or the Hebrew Priestess Institute. This is really out there, but really cool. Basically trying to reclaim a lot of the divine feminine, to reclaim all of this powerful feminine language and imagery in Hebrew text. So she's a JTS ordinee, but she is now doing like really, really different kind of out there things. And so she's got the scholarship to be able to do this translation of the Siddur, but also make a text that is very prayerful. So I just want to show you, before we look at how she has translated this Siddur, I want to show you, I'm going to put up on the screen and read a little bit about the act of translation, and then we're going to look at it. Actually, no, I'm not, because we don't have enough time to do that. But I'm going to read it to you. So she says, It is said that all translators are liars, and certainly I am no different. You know, I'm gonna do this so you can see it at the same time. There we go. I'm right here. I encourage all of my students to learn Hebrew precisely because translation is such a risky business. This translation is inflected by my voice and my understanding with all of its uniqueness and with all of its flaws. I do mean to be truthful in that I'm attempting to translate the Hebrew as I hear it, incorporating resonances as Jews have heard them throughout time. So I'm happy to send this PDF to anyone that wants. It's available for free on the internet, so I don't feel bad about that. But I want to look and compare how she translates this song with how the Siddur Lev Shalem translates it. I lost my window. There it is. Okay. So let's have, just for the sake of hearing it in a different voice, let's have a different reader now read the Jill Hammer translation. Can anyone in this room read
I
that?
can read it.
All right, go for it, Heather.
All right. Go out and sing to God. Let's call out to the rock of grace. Let's live before the face with gratefulness. Let us celebrate in song. The infinite is a generous might and a great guide, more than all forms we imagine. God's hand firms earth's edges, molds mountain peaks, makes sea shapes land.
That's smaller, so I might need to.
Oh.
I'll take it there. I'll take it from here. Come, let us bow in awe and say our blessings before the breath that made us. For here is our God, and we are the shepherd's flock. If only we heard if only we heard God's voice. Don't close your heart, as you once did in that fearful wilderness, that place where your ancestors tested and saw my mysteries. Whole generations have been lost. Their hearts went straying, and they forgot my ways. In agitation, I wait. Perhaps they'll come to my rest at last. So different. It's so different. I mean, I'm just curious, like, how does that land for you? It's some parts are really different. Some parts you can see it's the same psalm-ish.
The first one, the Lev Shalem, all I could hear was like the best, like it's like a mom getting kids out the door in the morning. You start out all nice, like, good morning, children, everybody, let's go, let's have a great day. And by the end, you're yelling.
You're so frustrated.
And the second, her translation doesn't have that same, like, where you see the flip switch.
Yes.
And mom lost her cool.
But there was something that bothered me a lot from the second translation that is included in the first one. And it's a little bit related to my previous comment.
Yeah.
The Torah, it's all about history. And we are learning from history. The part of the places, the people that they are talking about in the Psalm, it's not on the second one.
It says the wilderness, but it doesn't name the places.
So you are
yeah.
lighting up, and so each time you learn less, like each generation you learn less and
History, because you don't learn the places where those things are.
Sure. No, that's a fear. That's a fear. It's like you're losing that connection to land. And there's a kind of, there's a forever tension, I think, between a universalizing kind of slant and a particularizing. And I think this translation is going in a universalizing direction, trying to make this sort of more, it's like softening some of those particular, like this place, we have a history in that particular place, but there's something that's lost there. There's like a, and it's kind of an edge, because I think when you read the Lev Shalem translation and you don't know what the people at Merivah or that time, it's like, oh, you remember, it's like an inside joke. Like, oh, you remember that time at Massah? And some people are like, ha ha ha, and some people are like, no, I can't connect to this because I don't remember. So we're getting some of that, push and pull here.
Can you again go over what was your goal in this interpretation? I mean, in this translation, was it modern interpretation? Was it what?
Let me
what
pull,
you said the goal was a better translation of the Hebrew. That's where I guess I'm lost because
Yeah, so they had a number of goals. One of the goals was to open up and trying out a lot of different names for God. So using a really rich palette of metaphor, and you said, the rock and the face and the breath that made us. So for the people that have a really hard time, just like the king all the time, you've got a lot more metaphor here to play with. So that was one thing. Another thing was, well, here's how they said it in the intro. The translation here expressed an ethos that is uniquely derived from the way we pray at Romamu, the beauty of the traditional Hebrew, and a living, fresh, warm English. So I think trying to kind of soften it, trying to make it feel warm, feel alive, that's really going to be, in the eye of the reader and the prayer. Some people will really resonate with that, some people will not.
And coming from somebody that speaks different languages, sometimes we need to tropicalize the translation. Something that will be very funny here will not necessarily be as funny as if you translate it literally. So they are making a translation for the time and the place, not only word by word.
Yeah.
Not literal. I have a question.
Yeah, Kathy.
In our services, do we sing the whole thing, word for word?
We usually, what we do is we sing the very beginning and the very end. So we sing something like, sometimes we'll sing, La funeranena, la funeranena. So that's one melody, or La funeranena, la donai, naria letsoi sheinu, nikadmafana vetota. So in Shlomo Karlbach, the 20th century rabbi, wrote that melody that became very, very popular for all of these Psalms of Kabbalah Shabbat. And so the way that was often done is you would sing the first sort of 4 lines, and then people would go off into mumble land, and they would sort of say to the rest of themselves, and then pick up with the last Arba'im Shana Akud Bedor Vaomaram Toei Levatem. So it's so funny because most of the time I have to tell you, I can't think about what these words mean because it makes no sense, because I'm singing in this nice, like,
Exactly.
it sounds ridiculous in the Hebrew. For 40 years, I was troubled by that generation. And I said, these are a people whose hearts have gone astray. They do not know my ways. And in anger, I swore they would not enter my rest. What? It's sort of, and this is why I'm glad that I'm not a native Hebrew speaker, because I can sort of suspend my belief for a moment and just sing it in that nice way. But it's funny when the words and the melody just do not match at all.
Yeah, because it's so nice when there are a couple of songs and Friday night or Saturday that I will try and let's put the melody to the English, and it's really very pretty.
Yeah.
And that doesn't.
It doesn't quite cut it.
Doesn't cut it. That's it.
So we have just a couple of minutes left, and I want to do a little activity with you. Those of you who study with me on Tuesday mornings have done something like this before, but I have started doing this with prayer, and I find it really helpful. So this is something called Erasure Poetry. This is the easiest kind of poetry in the world because you don't have to be creative in the traditional sense. You don't have to like come up with fancy flowery words. You take a poem, or in our case, a prayer text, and you cross out words until it is a poem or a prayer that resonates for you. And so what I'm going to do is we're going to do this with Psalm 95. We're going to do erasure poetry. I am going to hold on. Need to copy the thing. No, share. Okay, so if you're on Zoom with me, I'm sticking the link to a Google Doc in the chat. So you can open it up. And if you are tech savvy and know how to make a copy of this doc for yourself, because I have it in view only, go ahead and do that. If that seems overwhelming or complicated for you, don't worry. I am, hold on, oh, I could do that. I could do that. Here it is. Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna put the, yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, so yeah, all right. So right now all the words are in a chat. So then you could copy paste that and stick it into a Word doc, or you can just pull out a journal. And if you have the book in here, you can just do it in your book. I have golf pencils that I'm gonna pass around. Yeah, I recommend using a pencil. Take one and pass. Sending them around. So essentially what you're going to want to do is either electronically or by hand. You are going to want to play with this and cross out or, you know, delete words. Some of you may be like recoiling, I can't do that. I promise you, you can do that. You can also keep all the words. You might decide that like you want to keep every single one of these words, which is great. But I want to encourage you to make this your own and play with it. And I'll show you mine in a minute because I did this earlier. I'll stop the share. Mine's pretty crossed out. There's a lot of dark pencil there. So I don't want to read you mine yet because I don't want to influence what you're doing. But I'm gonna give you about not enough time, maybe 3 minutes to do this on your own. And then I'll invite a couple of you to share yours. Anybody got any questions? Get the exercise? Okay. All right, so we're gonna take 2-3 minutes to do this and then we'll share what we've got.
This is the last one you put in the chat, right?
Yeah, and if you want to just like take the first, 2 paragraphs and start there, you may not get through the whole thing, but that's okay. Or if you want to just take the last paragraph, the tricky one, and start there, also good. Okay. I see a few people in here are paused. So if you need more time, definitely invite you to return later and finish your work. But I'm curious if there is somebody who wants to share what they've done, a part or all. Heather, go for it.
I have a feeling that I probably, the first part probably looks similar to other people. My second part, the troubling part, the second page here, I'm left with, for Adonai is our God and we are God's flock. Listen today to God's voice and not become hard-hearted. Here.
That's right.
Sounds about right.
The end.
It's good. And I think each person is going to figure out a text that works for them. And the test is really, how does it feel when you say it? Especially on a Friday night, I really encourage you to like, try it out, see how it sounds to say the English. You could also, if you're more comfortable in Hebrew, you could do this in the Hebrew. But we're looking for trying to find a text that we can pray with some personal authenticity. Okay, David, go for it.
Well, I mean, just one thing, when I was looking at that last, the last paragraph, which is the longest, the first three is about, let us go sing to Adonai, describing what Adonai has done, and let's bow or bend our knees in the presence. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of the last one, in the desert, when your ancestors tried me, tested me. So all of a sudden, God enters into this and starts, giving his or her opinion. It makes it a little bit more troublesome. I don't know if that's the right word, but controversial. I mean, if we're going to, a more sort of solemn, gentle way to reform or build up our relationship with God, I could almost see just the first three paragraphs and just be done with it.
That works.
Yeah. And I'll say one other change. Usually when I'm doing this, I try to like follow the rules and I don't like add anything else. But the one change I often will make that works pretty well for me, and it, might work for you, is we're talking about God here in the third person. So it's hard to pray as like a description. Let us greet God. We're talking about God. I change it to you. I change it to a capital Y, you, and that really works for me. So I'll just share what mine sounds like.
Can I just say one thing
Yeah.
about the first part?
Sure.
Paragraph. I will take almost everything on the English translation because it says that God made the earth and the mountains and the sea. And it says the sea is God's, for God made it. I made my kids, but they are not mine. Like they are, I don't owe them.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful. I mean, that's such an interesting, I mean, that's as a parent, that's like, that, I think it's Khalil Gibran in The Prophet. He has a line almost exactly like what you just said, like, we come from you, but we are not of you, or something like that.
So if it says it's God's because he made it.
Yeah, it's like it doesn't belong to you anymore, maybe. Just because you made it, does it really belong to you? No, it's like of the universe now. Yeah.
So you would delete that, right?
Yes.
Right.
And this is a personal school of thought on the last paragraph in the first part. And this is repeated on several of the prayers. That it says, "Come then, let us go and kneel." Even if in the Aleinu, that's what you do. I come from a school of thought that it's a little bit of Avodah Zarah.
Oh, to bow.
Yeah, mine got completely, that whole line bowing.
Interesting. Anybody else, before we run out of time, wanna share theirs?
I could give a stab at it, but it's
Go for it.
kind of off the top of my head because I didn't have paper, so I'm going to try and remember what I said. But I just did the first two. I said, sing to Adonai, trumpet praise, filled with thanks, greet God, raise voices. Great is Adonai. God's hands formed earth's deep, mountain crests, the sea, dry land, God's work, God made it, God's hands.
I love like cadence of it too. It's very like, it almost like I feel like I'm scanning through, like just seeing this whole landscape.
Gary had something.
Yeah, yeah, Gary, go for it.
Their father-in-law. Let's see.
Go for it.
Okay, can you hear?
Yeah.
I mean, I kept the beginning basically the same too, although I took out the greater than all other deities because I didn't find that necessary. And in the third paragraph, I said, rather than bow and kneel, I would rather appreciate Adonai, our God, and do away with the flock of sheep. And in the end, only the first basically 2 lines. If only you'd listen today to God's voice and not become hard-hearted, and then eliminate everything else that sounded threatening actually to me.
Yeah, very, very similar. And Kathy, I saw you too. Do you want to share yours?
Sure. I didn't do anything with the first one because I didn't copy it. I'm sorry. The first paragraph. I start with the second. Great is Adonai, whose hands formed the earth's deep, mountain crests, the sea, dry land, all was fashioned by God's hands. Come, let us bend our knees in the presence of Adonai, who formed us, for we are God's flock, sheep in God's caring hands. And then I would not do anything with the last one. I would delete it all.
Got it. Yeah, so what I love about this is that, at least for me, when I did this in pencil, like the core words, the words I cut out are still peeking through. You know, they're not gone, they're not going anywhere. And I still want all those words in my Siddur. I don't want to, you know, I hated like, you know, growing up and feeling like, oh, you stole something from me by like not teaching me that there were more words in the liturgy. I like knowing what is all there, but I like having the freedom to be able to kind of have some words come to the surface and other words recede to the background. And I love that some of the words that I cut from mine, you preserved in yours. And there was a quote that I'm just going to end on, which I come back to again and again whenever I'm looking at the Siddur, which is something, I'm going to paraphrase it, something like, and this is Rabbi Eli Confer says this, that the text of the Siddur is supposed to last for our entire lives. We're going to come back to this, if not every day, then every week or every month, or maybe at least for some of us every year. It's got to have enough staying power and enough like thickness and texture to not have all of its meaning revealed on the very first time you look at it. So of course there are going to be parts that feel really sticky to us that aren't going to work in our ears. And so there is this process of both like reclaiming a text that we can feel like we can say with authenticity, and also having this sort of humility to say like, maybe this is meant for somebody else right now and not for me, and that's okay. Or like, maybe in 20, 30 years, I will know some new dimension of this, like the parenthood pieces, I think, you know, it's like, oh, right, as a parent, like it rings different in a totally new way. So I just want to bless us with the kind of, I think, agency and power individually to help, you know, find the text that we need in order to pray and connect and build this bridge from the world as it is to the world as it could be every week on Friday night. So thank you for joining for this first class, and Yasher Koach to all of you. If you have thoughts about where to go from here, I'd love to hear them. If not, we will probably go straight to the G word. And or we'll meander through it, but send me an email. I'm rabbilauren@orthodox.org. And especially those of you who are joining us for the first time, I'm so glad that you're with us, and reach out to me. I'd love to chat more. Thank you. Thank you. And have a good night. And if you want to stick around and ask any questions, you can do that too. But here we are.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Rabbi, I have a question, and that is, it feels in the service to me as if what's determining what we're saying or chanting is the melodies. And I'm not paying any attention to the words at all, lots of the time. I'm joining the spirit of music.
Totally.
That's why it's so great when you can't understand the words.
Yeah.
Because that to me.
Yank it,
is-
Heather. Hold. Push in on the. Yeah, there you go.
That to me is where what Friday night's all
Yeah.
about is you feel the song, not the words.
That's right. That's right. The words, and that's so true for me. Like I am 95% of the time not thinking about the words that I'm saying. They are just a conduit for the melody. I could be saying, like, I could do Yan and I the entire service and it would be just as good, if not better. To be totally
Yeah, but not
honest.
everybody's doing that.
I know not everybody feels that way, and I don't do it because there's something with the texture of the words that's beautiful, but I'm definitely not processing the meaning.
So
And
I want to know, you're gonna answer Kathy's question as to why do we do all the verses of the Chabad and not
I grew up only doing verses 1, 2, 5, and 9.
Yeah, see, a lot of times I did 1, 2. and the
Shamor
last two.
v'zator, Likrat Shabbat, Hitori, and Bowie Bishel.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of times it was the first 2 and the last 2.
Yeah, so that was, I grew up with that.
With all of them. So-
Yeah,
And
I
I also heard that on, before Tisha B'Av, you definitely didn't do the whole thing. though. That was one that, because it was.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, to get.
I know you changed it to Elitzion, but I didn't know you made it
Yeah,
shorter.
yeah, that it was shorter.
Interesting. There's so many different customs, and some of it is totally idiosyncratic, Kathy. It's like, I mean, it's often a function of like length of the service. When we were, for many months, we were just doing Kabbalah Shabbat in Zoom, and it was about a, 45-minute, hour-long service. And then we added Ma'ariv back in, and then it ballooned a little bit. And so,
Once we came back, we had a month.
yeah. Once we were back in the sanctuary. Yeah. So there's a little bit of like trying to create, a flow that, but
I wonder if that was one of the aims when they created that Beatles Shabbat thing, because of the music that was utilized.
sure. Yeah. Totally.
I mean, I'd probably respond to the prayers differently if I was singing them to one of the Beatles songs.
Yeah, it's a totally different kind of experience. And it's a pretty ancient Jewish practice to like adopt the melodies of the society, that you're in. That's not new.
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm sure my mother turned.
Exactly. William Teller. Yeah.
Yeah, we could just start out the service with the first song, Help.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting. Like Dr. Amy did something with the religious school kids one time, and I've done this before, where we, take the Micha Mocha melodies, and like there's some that are like, Debbie Friedman, Micha Mocha Peli Madonna, like the timbrel, Miriam the timbrels versus like Micha Mocha, like worlds apart. So
Yeah, and then the one that Mario brought, I don't know where he got that.
there's so many.
Yeah.
And I should have put this in the chat for people. If you're on Spotify, Rabbi Josh Warshawski, who's a really amazing contemporary Jewish musician, just put like a playlist together. It's like all the songs he knows of for like all of Kabbalah Shabbat. So it's a nice Friday afternoon. Resource.
Getting
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, we're gonna shut down for tonight, but I will see you soon, I hope. Friday night. See you Friday night.
Rabbi Lauren?
Yeah, Marie.
Hey, sorry, I was like in a loud place, so I can. Can I ask you a question really quick though about towards the ending of the last Psalms that a lot of people like, it's natural to try to drop because it might be a little more violent, or you think about the sins of the ancestors and such. Can you even hear me? I'm sorry, I'm on my phone.
What was the question?
I'm sorry. Since I'm on my phone, I don't really know how where even the Zoom mic is. I'll just follow up with you individually later.
Okay, no, I can hear you fine. I just didn't know what the question you're asking was.
Oh, okay. Well, talking about, being upset for 40 years and thinking about why the ancestors might have been not unworthy. But it just relates to a conversation I was having with Corey earlier, that, some of the Psalms don't necessarily sit well because we don't like to think of violence or like wrathfulness or being separate necessarily. You want to hear the more calming Psalms. And it seems, is it right, I suppose, to try to look past that or to try to find the reasoning as to why, I don't know, I might feel such distance?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends, and this is a larger conversation, but I think it depends on what your goal is in prayer. Some people, or at some points in your life, the goal is I really want to understand and wrestle. Like I have the bandwidth to actually wrestle with the difficult texts and the hard stuff. And so I'm going to go straight for the thing that is like, okay, why might there be a wrathful God? And is there anything in that I can relate to? Other times that's not the goal. Like I'm not about wrestling on Friday night. I just want to leave that behind. That's what I do during the week. And I actually connect to something that feels and okay. And I do this all the time. Like sometimes I'm like, let me sink my teeth into it and really struggle with it. Other times I'm like, I'm just going to ignore this week because I don't have the bandwidth for it. So it's not that there's a right or wrong. It's that, different moments call for different approaches.
I suppose kind of like the news. I was just, we were struggling with Psalms reading earlier today because we pulled a couple random ones and they were about war and wrath, and we were looking for calm, and I just had to, the best I could be was like, well, this is the time of David. There were lots of enemies. Like, is that reductive? Or?
No, and I think you can, what are the enemies? Like a lot of times in Psalms, it sort of looks at first like those enemies are external, but the enemies could be internal, and that changes the whole landscape of what, oh, I'm actually battling with inner demons here or inner roadblocks. And that really opens up a whole, we could do a whole other thing on those kind of Psalms.
I appreciate that because I was having doubts about it and I wasn't sure if I would even speak about it because my limitations right now, but it just seemed too particular and something I'd struggled with. And I thought maybe inner demons and such things, and all these are interpretations. Is part of why I mentioned the whole Solomon Sheba thing. But that's kind of what I was feeling for. I guess I needed just affirmation.
Totally. I affirm you.
Okay. I appreciate that. All right. Well, thank you very much. You have a nice night.
You too. All right.
And we'll talk next week.
We'll talk next week. I'll see you all on Wednesday.
Yeah, that sounds good. Have a good night.
You too. Bye, Emily. Good to see you.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. I'm really looking forward to getting to know y'all more. So
yeah,
excited.